So I think maybe we can introduce John Dye from who has been. I mean, John will introduce himself, but I just want to give a big thank to John. You know, to agree to give us a presentation on what they do. I'm really excited to learn about your group and all the effort you are putting, you know, in keeping our rivers back to their natural state, you know, and preserving them and helping this. And I hope you will touch a little bit on this today, you know, and introduce your organization. But I'm really excited, and maybe you can give us a little introduction, you know, on the organization and on yourself. And thank you so much for giving us this talk today. I realize that I have to make you a co-host too, so you can share your screen.
Sure.
Thank you.
I put together a little presentation. Yeah, I'm John Dye with Rivers for Change. And I actually met Penny, I think back in the 80s. I learned to paddle in San Francisco with a guy named Reg Lake. I was a student of his. And one evening he said, you know, you should come over and check out this group that meets in this this conference room at UCSF. That's how I met Bay Area Sea Kayakers. And I've been a member off and on, more off than on. And then around 2011, I went to work for Tuolumne River Trust. And they were doing something that they called at that time Paddle of the Sea, which was a fundraiser calling attention to issues on the Tuolumne, which is where San Francisco gets most, if not all of its water, along with a couple of communities along the peninsula. And they were doing something called Paddle of the Sea, which started up at Merrill's Pool, which is the main stem Tuolumne whitewater run, and ending at the Golden Gate. And it took us a month to do that. And at the time, they were doing all of the whitewater and then the Delta stuff, except they were skipping the last like 70 or 80 miles because they thought it was too difficult to do. And I said, well, we're gonna do the difficult stuff. You can't call it Paddle of the Sea if you don't paddle to the sea. And that's where I met Danielle Katz. Danielle was grew up in Bolinas and was a guide up in Alaska and Canada, Idaho, with her father, Jimmy. And she had this dream of developing a nonprofit that would bring people's attention to source to sea issues. And I was underemployed at the time, and I didn't have any employment prospects after TRT. So I said, yeah, let's just go do that. And that was the start of Rivers for Change. We don't get involved in politics. We don't get involved in dam removal. We support those issues, but really what we do is bring people's attention to the importance of rivers and what they do for us, and how they act, especially in California. We've done some projects overseas, but really our focus is in the Western US. And I guess a good example of what we've done would be in 2015, we helped a CNN reporter by the name of John Sutter do a source to sea on the San Joaquin, and bring attention to what's going on in the San Joaquin, the fact that it's over allocated, that none of the whitewater, the river water in the San Joaquin actually reaches the Golden Gate. There's a 40-mile stretch of the San Joaquin that is absolutely dry. The river bottom around the San Joaquin is actually higher than the surrounding farmland around.
Excuse me, is that San Joaquin dry even in the wintertime?
Yes, the San Joaquin is that 40-mile stretch is dry even in the wintertime. And because the farmland around there, which is very rich, when it's plowed up, it oxidizes. A certain percentage of it evaporates. And what happens is, so if you plow up 10 inches of farmland, after like 6 months, you've only got 9.5 inches of soil. So that water, that soil is sinking. So the river bottom now is about 9 feet above the surrounding farmland.
So the section, the 40-mile section, is that from Firebaugh North?
That's around Fireball. Yeah, it's about 20 miles north of Mendota Pool. Yeah, so essentially, the headwaters of the San Joaquin has become the Merced River. Yeah, there's San Joaquin, then there's Merced, then there's Tuolumne, and then marching on north with Stanislaus, Casumes, McCollum, and then on up to the American. They all drain, well, the American doesn't drain into the San Joaquin, but the rest of them all drain into the San Joaquin. But yeah, the headwaters of the San Joaquin is the Merced. But that's just some background on Rivers for Change. We also are working on an educational program, which isn't live yet, for kids. We've done Source to Sea adventures up on the Truckee with Sue Norman, where we reached about 2,000 school kids with that program, got a fair amount of them out on that river and experienced that and just see what the Truckee does, what it services, not just in terms of like fish and wildlife and enjoyment for just people getting out on the water, but drinking water for about 2 million people, and water for industry as well. And then we do micro grants. We started doing these about 2 years ago, where we give paddlers who are going out and doing these Source to Sea adventures and trying to do outreach with local nonprofits and schools. We sponsored a woman who now works down at Sea Trek, Luann Harris. She did a solo Source to Sea on the Mississippi, top to bottom, on a stand-up paddleboard. And then another woman who did a Source to Sea up on the Columbia, starting up in Canada and going down through the US and documenting that, and doing outreach to nonprofits and newspapers and school kids, along the way. And when we started this, we had trouble doing these Source to Seas and doing outreach and connecting with schools along the way, and realized, oh, we're biting off way more than we can chew. This is really hard. And then a few years later, we got the idea, well, let's just start granting other paddlers who've got this idea. Let's see how they can do it. Let's help them do it, and see what they can do and teach us how to do it. So that's kind of some background. And I thought what I'd do this evening is show you the Sacramento. That is a river, that's one of the 12 Source to Sea paddles that we did in 2012. And when we were trying to figure out, okay, what is this organization? What are we doing? Who needs help in California? And how could we contribute? So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And start a slideshow. Can everybody see that? Does the
Looks
logo?
good.
Perfect.
Yeah, okay. So this is primarily the first trip that we did on the Sacramento in 2012 with a few other slides interspersed. And what I hope, this turned out to be a real gem for us. We did not expect it to be a gem. I knew that the top 30 miles of whitewater were going to be great. We thought the rest of it was just going to be drudgery. And it did not turn out that way at all. And because of the exploration that we did, this morphed into something called the Cal 100, which was a race that we ran on the Sacramento. It was more of an outreach event that was disguised as a race. And a friend of ours, Carter Johnson, helped us, paddle stupid long distances in a very short amount of time, and enjoy ourselves while we were doing it. But I don't want to skip ahead to that. I want to go on to what we're doing here. This is an overall map of the Sacramento. Other than the San Joaquin, it's the longest river system in California. And these little red dots kind of identify the 9 days that we spent on the river in 2012. We did 2 days of whitewater up at the top, and those are, right up here, if you can see my cursor up above Shasta Reservoir. There's a whitewater section up there that starts, it's called Box Canyon. That's a class 4 run, and then it mellows down pretty quickly to about, I'd say about 26, 27 miles of really nice class 2, 3.
John, excuse me, but did you run Box Canyon yourself?
I did not run Box Canyon. I put in just 2 miles below Box Canyon.
I see. I ran it back in the 70s, and it was really a spectacular, beautiful run.
Yeah.
You have to lower your kayak about 200 feet into the canyon.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that. Does that look familiar?
No, that was not the put in. We went down a cliff along the side, not at the spillway.
Okay, well, and I think that cliff that you went down might be over here on the left side of the screen. This is like standing in the center of the dam, looking down at the spillway.
That sounds correct. There was a little bit of a landing at the beach, or it might have been a little bit further downstream. But
yeah. So yeah, it's a pretty tight, intimate canyon. This was over here. This is our whitewater team, pre-scruffed. Kevin, many of you might recognize Galen from Sea Trek. And RFC founder and my partner in this, Danielle Katz, and myself. That was our 2012 team. And this is what the river looks like. It's lush. It moves along. This is a waterfall coming down from the headwaters, Mount Shasta, that you can pretty much paddle right underneath. This is just like, I would say, a half a mile below the box. And this is typical upper Sacramento whitewater, just bouncy, class 3, not particularly constricted. Again, really lush, beautiful country. And it's pretty accessible. Highway 5 is not that far away. But yeah, it's not hard to get to. There was one portage. Yeah, I didn't remember the portage until I looked at these photos. But I think there was a log jam in the river that we decided, yeah, we're going to go around that. This is about as constricted as it gets. Yeah, it's not scary whitewater. Otherwise, I would not have done it. When we were doing this, we were doing an algae sampling citizen science work for a researcher in Davis who was very interested to know what the algae content of the river was. I wish we could have done more of this in more California rivers. We just found it very difficult to do river exploration and voyaging and recording what was going on with the rivers at the same time as doing citizen science. But one of the things we learned was, you pick up these rocks and you poke around in the river and you see all sorts of critters moving around, which is a pretty good sign of a healthy river. This is at Dog Creek, which is where we stopped and we transitioned from. This is at the beginning of the reservoir, and the beginning of the reservoir, it varies from year to year depending on what the water level is. This year it was pretty high, and so as soon as we could, we ditched the whitewater boats and we got in sea kayaks because we didn't want to have whitewater boats out in the reservoir. Galen had planned to paddle with us across the reservoir, but he came down with a really serious allergic reaction to flat water. He looked at 22, 23 miles of flat water to get across the lake and 80-degree temperatures and just said, look at the time. I'm going to go skiing up on Mount Shasta. So Danielle and Kevin and I continued on. And this is once we got out into the lake, and we're coming down this arm right here. That's the Sacramento. Over here is the McCloud. And then this is actually a small creek here. And then this is the pit. It's interesting that the pit is actually the longer arm, which means that the Sacramento River is misnamed. It really should be the Pitt River. I don't know what the deal is. Apparently at the time that it was named, they didn't realize that the pit was as long as it was. Otherwise, we'd have the Pitt River. And this sign, in normal water years, this is bone dry. We just paddled up to it. This is at a launching site. This is at Lakehead, actually. And yeah, it was just high water and we could just paddle right up to it. Here's a little bit better view. We're right there and then on our way down. This was a one-day paddle down to Shasta Dam. Unless you've got a double and a fast sea kayak, it's a lot to chew off in one day, but it is pretty. I'm not a big fan of reservoirs and man-made obstructions, but I gotta admit, as man-made flat water goes, this is not bad. And I think we made our way down to, oh, I got a little video here. I'm gonna punch this. This is coming up to Slaughterhouse Island. We did this paddle on Mother's Day weekend, and I did not realize that a lot of students celebrate Mother's Day weekend by going out on this reservoir and getting rip-roaring drunk on houseboats. But
hey, you're here with Rivers for Change on Lake Shasta. We're in front of Slaughterhouse Island, which seems to be having a lot of partying going on here. But what's actually important about this spot is that it is the confluence of the Pitt and the Sacramento. So behind us we have the
oh, sorry. Did I stop that?
Pitt River, which of course is drowned out a little bit in this reservoir here, and we've just come down the Sacramento. The Pitt is the longest tributary to the Sacramento. I think it's about 300 plus miles long, and it would be
Yeah, so that was our introduction to that section of Lake Shasta. And yeah, we had no idea we were going to paddle into a party. And there were sheriff's boats sitting around at a safe distance, watching the partiers and just letting them have a good time and just being on call, you know, if somebody, you know, fell in the water drunk, and yeah, to just take care of them. And this was just another sample site that we did for algae and water samples. This is actually the takeout next to the dam at Lake Shasta. And you know, it's not as bad as it looks. What happens is everything that falls into the reservoir slowly makes its way down to the dam and then just gets blocked up against the shore. So trash, lumber, everything. That was the takeout. This turned out to be pretty darn nice, I must say. This is a downhill portage. It's quite long. It's about 1.5 miles. But when you get to the bottom, there are wilderness campsites at the base. And yeah, I think this was like night 3 on the voyage. And we learned that an early morning takeoff from here is a good idea because next to us are the off-highway vehicle campsites, and they start revving up their motorcycles at about 5:30, 6 a.m. So yeah, we had an early takeoff. And this is Keswick. This is Keswick Reservoir, which I guess doesn't get much attention. What it is it's just a holding basin for Shasta. How Shasta works is they generate power during the day and then they turn it off at night. So Keswick absorbs that water and then it slowly releases it to downstream during the evening. And that way the Sacramento River maintains a decent pulse. So fish can survive. That's basically what Shasta does, is it's flood control and fish control. And Keswick's not bad. The further you get down it, things kind of degrade. Once you get to the bottom, there's a log jam and, you know, a moderate amount of trash. But you know, that's just at the bottom. You know, unless you were trying to do a real, you know, source to sea on the Sacramento, you know, I would say skip it. And this is Keswick Dam. We couldn't figure out where the portage was around the dam, and there was a phone there. So we were like, yeah, well, let's just call and find out. And the dam operators had never talked to kayakers who wanted to portage around, but they told us how to do it. That was fine. This was probably the hardest portage of the trip. And this is just a little taste of it. It's narrow. It's relatively steep. Yeah, I think that's about when the boat fell off the wheels right there. And that was, I think that was, Keswick was one of the toughest days of the trip. But once you get past Keswick, you're in Redding, and you're in the outskirts of Redding, and it's actually pretty darn pretty coming into Redding. It's what they call Lake Redding, which we could not figure out until we got down to this. This is in central Redding. There is a dam that goes all the way across the river. That's a seasonal dam that they put up that's about 6 feet high, 4 feet high, that slows down the river. And it creates this, well, lake, artificial lake. And then it's got a fish ladder that goes around the side of it. By the time we portaged around this was our like 2 portage day. We were pretty dog tired, and we just okie camped on the side of the river. And just above, yeah, sorry, this is where we are now in the map, Redding. And this is just downstream of us. This incredible structure, this is a Santiago Calatrava sculpture, which Redding put up. Calatrava told him it would cost 1 million. I think it cost 13 million by the end of it. And yeah, okay, cost overruns, but man, it is beautiful. And there's, yeah, if you go up there, I really encourage you to check it out. There's a museum on one side, there's an arboretum on the other side. Redding's got some real challenges, but kudos to them for putting.
John, have you seen the Calatrava Bridge in Bilbao near the Getty Museum?
I've only seen the photos. I haven't been there.
It's sort of the inspiration for this one. It is more, it's bigger, it's longer, and it's more curvaceous, but it's one of the great reasons for traveling to Bilbao.
I'll put it on my list.
I believe that the pylon is used as a sundial as well.
Yes, it is. That's right. It's called the Sundial Bridge, and there is a sundial over on River Left. Yeah, and it tells time. Good call. The next morning we got up and met some of the locals. I got a big kick out of this guy on the left who had built this recumbent bicycle out of scavenged parts. And yeah, he was just out there having a great time. Yeah, and this is paddling under the Sundial Bridge. And this is the point where we really didn't know what was downstream. I was in charge of research for this, which is another way of saying I did a really shitty job of it, and just said, yeah, we'll just throw a bunch of food and sleeping bags in the boats and go for it. And it turned out to be nice current, not much in the way of, you got no scary rapids, and yeah, a nice balance between an accessible river and a semi-wilderness experience. And I mean, this is from different trips. It's just a point that you can run this river a lot of different ways. You can run it on a stand-up paddleboard. You can do it in a surf ski. You can do it with 4 idiot friends of yours on a really slow paddleboard. You can do it on a stand-up tandem paddleboard. That was actually an inflatable. Or you can do it in a sea kayak. It's really quite friendly. You do have to know how to read water. Reading a river and understanding, where the water is going to go, and being able to read the river, and also being able to understand how to swim in a river. Very different from swimming in an ocean. It's not complicated, but you want to have some guidance there. This is just up above what's called China Rapid. You're actually paddling. This is approaching an old lava flow from Lassen that you got to paddle through. But the river scenery for just Northern California and being able to get there, it's pretty spectacular. And just meeting people along the way that are doing fishing and just out on the water enjoying it was great. Yeah, just more river scenery. We developed a rule that we tried not to talk about food until at least like 11 a.m. Yeah, we call those the food fantasies. What do we want to eat? Yeah, and we didn't take along anything special, but preparing those bagels to get them exactly like we wanted was really important. I'm sure many of you can relate. Yeah, just some more river scenery. And this is about as bouncy as the river gets. except for, just a couple of rapids. It's pretty easy to negotiate if you're familiar with Reed and Whitewater. This was our takeout for our first day on the lower Sacramento, below Redding. We were pretty surprised that we were able to do 54 miles. If you're used to paddling on the ocean or paddling on the bay, the idea of doing that length is just, yeah, who would try to do that outside of the gonzo paddle? And I don't think even the gonzo paddle covers that much ground. But when you've got current pushing you, everything gets a little easier. But yeah, I admit this was a long day.
What is the flow of the river in a place like this?
Say that again, Xavier.
So what would be the flow of the river? Do you know how much assist you get?
Oh, you can count on 2 to 3 miles per hour.
Okay.
Sometimes we recorded when we were paddling through the quicker sections. My GPS recorded like 14 miles an hour at one point. But that was like paddling hard, going down through a small rapid with good flow. And it varies. The river can flow anywhere from 4,000 to up to 109,000 cubic feet per second. I would stay off it at anything over about 30,000. And if you're not used to river talk, they're measured in CFS, cubic feet per second. So, let's say like 10,000, 12,000, that might be a common flow for this river. So a cubic foot is about the size of a chicken. So just think of 10,000 chickens running past you every second. And then if you think of each one of those chickens weighing 67 pounds, that's what a cubic foot of water weighs. So that's a lot of power. That's a lot of force moving you down the river. And this is at Red Bluff. This is just below Red Bluff. And let's see, checkpoint 2 right here. These are little maps from the Cal 100. Checkpoint 1, we just blew past this one. And checkpoint 2 is where we're at now. Red Bluff is just outside of the frame. There's a nice little campground here, which you can book on the state campground website. There's a dam that's defunct just below it that I'm going to show you in a minute. This is where we're headed next, Woodson Bridge. And then I'm going to introduce you in a little bit to a wonderful dive bar called Scotty's, which is downstream, which apparently holds the record for the most Bud Light sold in America by a single establishment. We'll get to that in a minute. Let's see, where are we here? Balls Ferry, yeah, Red Bluff. Yeah, we're right around there. Ah, there's a red spot that I was looking for. Yeah, that's where we are now. So after that day, we decided it was time for a Grand Slam breakfast at Denny's. Yeah, and we soaked that up. And then Kevin shuttled our car, and Danielle and I continued in the double. Incidentally, the previous day, right at the start of the day, I had broken the rudder on that Luxia 2. So I had fun paddling the 54 miles in the Luxia with no rudder. That was a learning experience. This is a dam that no longer works. These big panels actually move up and down. Something to do with fish control and water irrigation. Bureau of Rec used to move these panels up and down and drop them into the water and block the river. I think NRDC had an issue with that. It was just blocking fish passage. So this dam no longer works, but they do drop the panels down, and you can see some of these panels are lower than others, and the panels that are low indicate where these fish traps are. And the fish traps, Fish and Game catches, they check those every day, and they do fish counts in those to try and figure out what's in the river, how many salmon are getting up here, what's alive, what's not. Just a little pointer, do not paddle into the fish traps. That would be bad. Avoid those if you do this. More wildlife as you get down below Red Bluff. It's a really pretty section of river with the white pelicans, mud dabbers, swallows, coyotes, ospreys. Yeah, I'm not saying you're going to see all of that, but it is beautiful. This is Woodson Bridge, which is what we called Checkpoint 3 when we were doing the Cal 100. There's also camping here that you can take advantage of. If you're kayaking this stretch, there are some trees in the river that you want to be cautious of. Trees are about the worst in terms of strainers and getting hung up on things. Sandbars, not so bad. Rocks, not so bad. Trees, bad. So you just want to like wake up when you're coming into Woodson Bridge and pay attention. It's not hard. You just need to be conscious. And then down below Woodson, it starts to slow down. You know, the river loses a little bit of gradient as you're coming down through here to Scotty's Landing. But, you know, it's still pretty. So this image on the right is the Irvine Finch boat launch ramp. It's just a couple of miles up above Scotty's Landing. So there's this perfect storm of a nice accessible boat ramp, a riverside bar with free-flowing taps, and college students from Chico State. So people put in at Irvine Finch in their inner tubes, and they float down to Scotty's, and they've usually got a 12-pack with them. And by the time they get there, they're pretty well soused. And then Scotty's helps them continue that. And I mean, we didn't have any problem, you know, floating past here. Everybody was pretty friendly, but it's just a different mode of river travel than what I'm used to. Scotty's, if you go up there, it is definitely worth checking out. It is run by John Scott, who is a retired rodeo clown, who now runs this riverside bar and restaurant. And like I said, they, for several years, held the record for selling the most Bud Light of any like establishment in America, from what I'm told. And the place is decorated with rodeo pictures and medals, and his former career as a rodeo clown. And it's just an interesting place. Irvine Finch is also a good place to drop a car. It's pretty accessible on Highway 132 going into Chico. There is a campground host that's there. You can park your car right by the campground host. They'll keep an eye on it. It's pretty safe. This is just below Scotty's Landing. It was probably the most picturesque campsite we had, just camping on a sandbar. And there's farmland all around us, but when you're on the river, you just really don't see the farmland. You just see the immediate trees and the banks, and yeah, what's going on there. This is actually a different trip that we did there. Again, this river is pretty friendly to just about any kind of river travel. And that photo down on the right is Dave Jensen just shoveling in fresh figs that grow right down on the river level. Those are probably not there now, but if you're there in the summer, just keep your eye out for blackberries, raspberries, and figs. In some cases, yeah, you kind of wonder, well, we don't even need to take food on this. This was a campsite on that same trip. There's a lot of islands on that upper river stretch, that 100 miles, and pretty much anywhere you see an island, you can just pull off and know, yeah, we'll just camp right here. As you get further down, you start to see more and more development, more irrigation, and I don't know, the folly of man. Some of it still operating, some of it not. But yeah, the typical 10,000 cubic feet per second, it starts to go away as you get closer to Sacramento. This is what I'm looking at here is a big marina. This is the confluence of the Feather, which is just upstream. The river gets a little more muddy. And you know, the closer you get to civilization, it's not as pleasant, but it still cooks along. I think this is the Tower Bridge going through Sacramento. We pulled off in Sacramento and, you know, spent a night, and then we got into below Sacramento. So there's not as much current here. You got to work a little bit harder. It's not quite as pretty. But you know, it still works. And this is where, I mean, you can get tidal effect as far up into Sacramento. So if you're doing this, I would suggest now is when you want to start looking at your tide log. When we did this, we did one day from Sacramento down to Rio Vista, which is right here. And we decided we would do the main stem down to this point here and just take a shortcut through this slough, which I think it was a good move. I really don't know because I've not done this section in the green over here, but it just looked more populated to us, and we just figured, yeah, let's skip that. And this is going through the slough, which was pretty nice. You know, you see riprap like this. Apparently this is like a car ferry that runs across the slough. Yeah, I just not experienced those. And then the closer we got to Rio Vista, the wind started. And if you've not paddled up there, I'll just say that it is a favorite spot for sailboarders, windsurfers, kiteboarders, because the wind just blows constantly. And it blows in the wrong direction. It blows upstream in your face. The last 5 miles of that were just challenging. And that's where we stopped on that particular source to sea. We didn't get to the sea on that. We came back 3 or 4 months later and finished it off and just paddled through the North Delta and took 3 days to do it. We actually skipped about 5 miles of that like windsurf area because we were just like, this is stupid. We're not going to paddle into 30-mile-an-hour winds for like 8 hours just to make 2 miles. And a friend of mine did this Cyril did this about 3 months ago, and he had the same experience. He was like, he put in one morning out of Rio Vista and paddled for like 5 hours and made 2 miles of headway until he broke his rudder and then got blown backwards into a beach by a Coast Guard station and said, help me, and they did. Yeah, so I'd skip Rio Vista. But other than that, I mean, it's a great river. And I'm gonna, let's see, I'm gonna stop share. Oh, there I am. And hand it back to everybody else, and you can ask me questions.
Thanks a lot. That was an amazing presentation. Any questions?
Well, I will comment that, John, the section of river that you skipped, you didn't miss much. It's more Rip Rap River, that's all. So you did take the right cutoff.
Yeah. You know, if I was going to go back and do that, and I do want to go back and do that, I would just do it in the opposite direction, and with the wind, and just surf.
Well, there's a lot of good paddling east of where you did the cutoff, you know, right behind Locke. There's the Delta Meadows.
Uh-huh.
In the winter, it's a lovely place to paddle. It's quiet. You can do a loop around. You can get to the Cosumnes River Preserve. The only drawback is in the summertime, you know, it's clogged up by skiers and party boaters, and it's not a good place to be in the summer.
We have gone up in some of those sloughs with California Native Plant Society. We learned that they have a native plant catalog, and some of those plants that they catalog are in hard to get places out in those sloughs, and we take them out there and to see if, you know, what was growing 20 years ago is still there, and that's rewarding and enjoyable.
Good.
Anybody else?
Hey, John, I have a question.
Sure.
You skipped from Rio Vista. If you like to start again, where you like to put in again? Which point?
Oh, if I was going to do that stretch?
Yes.
Someplace east of the Carquinez Bridge. Yeah, I'd put it, maybe put in Benicia. Put in Benicia with a strong west wind, and just go to Rio Vista.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think I'd like that. Yeah, when we took out in Rio Vista, it was, I don't know, by the time we got there, it was like 10 o'clock at night. No, it wasn't 10, it was like 9:30. And we like quick loaded up the boat, and just there was a yacht club diner that was still open, and we went in there, and they told us the kitchen was closed, and we said, look, we just paddled like 60 miles on the river. We're gonna faint right here in your entry. So you could either open up the kitchen or you could call like 911. You know, what's your choice? And they were pretty nice to us. They cooked us up a dinner.
Thank you, John.
So John, that was wonderful. It brought back memories and memories and memories of having paddled that river all the way down, little by little, piece by piece. And it is so beautiful. It is just so beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, well, and if you want to do river travel and sea kayaks, and there's like a bunch of other like quiet water rivers, you don't really have to go to those rivers to like learn how to do that in a sea kayak. You can just go up to Sacramento on the Lower American. And when I was running rivers, and that was my first love in a kayak, it took me a while, but I realized you don't get good at running rivers by running rivers. You get good at running rivers by going to like one section of river and working it. And you find a little eddy and you practice like catching that eddy. Catch it again, catch it again, catch it high, catch it low, you know, do your eddy turns, do peel outs out of that eddy, ferry out of that eddy.
And then add to that, John, do it all backwards.
Yes, yes, yeah. And then after you've learned how to do it forwards, then you do all those moves backwards. Yeah, and you don't use your rudder. Yeah, you don't use your rudder on any of that.
So in entire of Sacramento River, which section is your favorite?
It depends on what you're looking for. If you want a bouncy section that has a moderate amount of excitement, that section from Redding down to Anderson, or just the first 5 miles out of Redding is pretty good. If you're just looking to try and familiarize yourself with the river, just putting in at Woodson Bridge and paddling down to Scotty's, that's 19 miles. It's quieter. You don't have to worry about rapids or anything. You know, that's a good way to get used to the river. If you're, and that's what I like for getting used to river travel, is start lower down where it's not as exciting and then work your way up.
Thank you.
Hey, John, where would you say is like the section with the most sort of natural portions of the like riparian woodlands, where you might see a lot more, you know, birds or, you know, more nicer landscapes?
I'd say the 54 miles between Redding and Red Bluff. And there's multiple campsites on that. You know, you can break that down into 3-4 days easily. There's one BLM campsite called, I think it's called Murderer's Bar. Yeah, not the best name, sorry. But yeah, it's just a big flat, and it has a toilet on the site, which is a bonus. But yeah, I'd say Redding to Red Bluff.
So when you're paddling the river, do you carry your own water, or how do you do water?
Yes, I carry our own water, and there are campgrounds along the river where you can stop. I'd say about every like 15 to 20 miles, there's water. From Redding down to Anderson, which is like 17 miles. You know, there's and you can pretty much just see, oh, you know, there's activity going on here. Oh, maybe we can just pull over to the side, walk around with a water jug and find water. And something we learned in talking with the locals and finding, you know, well, where can we stop for water? Where are the takeouts? The takeouts are named after the bars that are next to the takeouts. So if you ask somebody, you know, well, where is the Ash Creek Bridge? They'd have no idea where that is, but they know where Rooster's Landing is because that's the bar that's at the Ash Creek Bridge crossing. So yeah, those names that you see on the map are not necessarily the names that you're going to see on the river. And another thing about it is there's tons of boat ramps on the river, but they all face downstream, and they'll be like behind brush, and so you'll be looking at your phone, going, "Yeah, we should be right here. This takeout is right here," and typically you have to like look around behind you, yeah, to see that boat ramp. And then quickly, you know, catch the eddy and paddle back up to it and look for a water fountain. That campground in Red Bluff is particularly nice. Yeah, there's a fish hatchery there. There's a little nonprofit there called the Sacramento River Discovery, blah, blah, blah. I can't remember the name of it, but they do a kids program, and there's a great lady who runs a native forestry program and fish program there for kids. Yeah, it's a nice takeout. That was the video that I showed where we were pulling out in the dark. Anybody else?
Well, I think now we need to come and explore ourselves.
Yeah, I encourage it. And if you want to do a posh trip up there, Emily Matthews, who now organizes what used to be the Cal 100 and has become the California River Quest, does a supported, I think it's a 3 or 4 day camping trip with catered wine and food. You don't have to carry anything. And she runs that trip in the fall. She's not running it this year because of COVID, but I'm sure she'll run it next year. And you can find her at CaliforniaRiverQuest.com.
That sounds, I like the wine idea. That sounds great.
Yeah, yeah, they put on a good show.
Well, thank you so much. Any additional comments? Any additional business we should address? And if not, everybody is terribly quiet today. I don't know if it's a heat, the smoke. I mean, we cannot give up, right?
Xavier, we're still in shock from the debate last night. We're still trying to recompose our brains.
Well, I mean, for me, it was a little bit, yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a usual thing here, but yeah, it was shocking. Some of the teachers had assigned the kids to watch the debate.
Oh.
And so the parents stopped it. And the teacher actually sent an email in the middle of the debate saying, you know, I'm releasing this assignment. Because I don't know how I can debrief that. Yeah, we usually don't talk too much about politics, but it's hard to.
So Xavier, it occurred to me that an interesting trip might be for a group of baskers to do a downwinder through the Delta. And then if they could be picked up by a sailboat and brought back against the wind, that might be a nice arrangement.
That could be a nice arrangement.
Yeah.
Do
you know anyone who has a sailboat?
Yeah, Tom, who has a sailboat?
That's in the water and actually sails?
Yeah, right now our boat doesn't actually float, but someday it will be a good kayak mothership, and that might be a nice trip.
Great fantasy.
Well, just how many kayaks do you think you could get onto that sailboat?
That's an experiment we have to do.
At least 4 or 5, and then we can fail. We can attach them in the back.
It's like stuffing clowns into a VW, right?
So can a sailboat pull a barge? Because you could fit a lot of kayaks on a barge.
We could tow them, yes.
Yeah.
Or you can just do a shuttle. My record for vehicles or boats on a small vehicle is 11.
And how many clowns?
Only the person driving.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not a good idea in Rio Vista, though, with all that wind.
I had 13 in my Dodge pickup truck up to the Middle Fork of the Salmon years ago. It was an image.
Well, Tom, if you get east of the bridge, you know, that goes across from over to Benicia, you're going to need a guide. There's some hairy grounds called the middle grounds. You're going to need a guide.
Are you volunteering?
So I might add that at Rio Vista, there's Sandy Beach Park, which has got to be one of the best parks that I have ever been to. It's got a white sandy beach. It's got a launch ramp. It's got a dock. It's got a campground. It's got an enclosed chain link fence place where you can store kayaks for a long-term basis. It's got rangers that monitor the place and it's just like, you couldn't ask for more. And it's right there in the middle of the Delta. So put that on your list too.
That sounds great.
And if you sail to Lock, you can go to Al Wops for a really great steak sandwich.
I don't think they call it Al Wops anymore.
No.
They have some politically correct name for it now.
No.
It's
Only people our age call it Al Wops.
It's Al and the Wop.
So it's called Al's Place, but when you enter, all of the Al the Wops merchandise is still for sale, including a red satin G-string. I have a picture of Dave Kennar with one of those on his head.
We better have that posted, don't you think?
Too much information.
Okay, well.
So Xavier, just a quick mention that at the next planning meeting, we'll be doing a little presentation, very short, of the progress that the resuming initiating paddles committee will do.
Can you give us a teaser of what
We
will happen there?
met last night and we made a lot of progress, and we're going to meet again on Monday. And Steve Goldfinger has taken over running the committee, which has been fabulous because that's actually making things happen. And so I think sometime this coming month, we'll be probably resuming paddle initiations.
I was considering, in honor of John's talk today, doing a Lower American run early November when the salmon are running. So if I have permission by then, I can do that.
You could do it anyway.
Okay, I'll get planning.
But so the planning meeting next week, this will be the time to see the work of this committee and to start paddling again. That's great.
Just a short presentation, just real short discussion of where we are and what else.
Well, Lisa, if you'd like a company on that Sacramento or Lower American trip, yeah, give me a call. And to everybody else out there, if you're wanting information on paddles on river-friendly, actually not river-friendly, people-friendly rivers, to kayakers, yeah, give me a line. I'm at john@riversforchange.org, and I'll close with that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
I do have a quick river story if you'd like to hear it.
Yes.
So here in Sacramento, a few of you have done the Lower American run with me. And in the last years, our homeless population has really made quite a mess of the last 2 miles of the American River. And so I've been too embarrassed to bring people down that part. So I usually take them out a little further up river, unfortunately. But at the confluence of the American River and the Sacramento River, there are 2 parks. And those parks are well populated by people at night. People live there. And so it's not a place you go alone frequently. But a friend of mine had a birthday and I had baked him a strawberry cake, and it was in the hatch of my kayak. And we drove to Discovery Park. And of course, as soon as I got there, I thought, oh, this was a dumb idea. We're going to leave a car here at night. This is stupid. But we were there and we drove into Discovery Park right about sunset. Our mission was we were going to paddle up the Sacramento River several miles. You can eddy hop the whole way up there and then float back under the full moon. And we'd have this strawberry cake and celebrate his birthday, right? So we pull into Discovery Park, and this homeless guy starts running towards me going, "You have kayaks, you have kayaks." And I thought, oh, this is a bad thing. And he said, "Do you know John Weed?" And John Weed is an old-time paddler. Everybody knows him. He paddles, surf skis. Apparently he goes to Discovery Park quite frequently. So all the community in that park know him. So this guy said, "Do you know John Weed?" And of course I said, "Yeah, everybody knows John Weed." He goes, "Oh, he comes here. I always watch his car." And I said, "That's great. Would you like some cake?" And he was like, "Oh, yes." And so I cut this cake in half. I handed him half of the birthday cake. And he said, "I will watch your car." And so we went and paddled for a few hours. We came back. It was 11 o'clock at night or something. And this guy was sitting right next to my car. And he said, "That was the best cake. Your car is safe." So perfect. So perfect.
Hey, Lisa, are they still having the Eppie's Great Race on that section anymore?
So the Eppie's organizers stopped. They Eppie Johnson passed away a couple of years ago, and his family just decided it was too much bother for them. But the local kayaking community, Dan Crandall, up in Lotus, he's kind of taken over the organization of it, and they've created a new group to run it. Of course, last year was the first year they did it. They had pretty good attendance considering it was, pulled together sort of last minute. And then they were planning to do it this year. And then of course, COVID happened. So hopefully they'll get it back together and be able to do it again next year. It is popular, and, I think it'll be a success. The local, there's a disability community in town that is the primary beneficiary of the money raised by it. So I can't imagine that they'll let that die.
Back to John Weed, a bunch of us are paddling through in Baja. After about 3 or 4 days of hard paddling, we get to this island. Oh, it's just a deserted island. We pull in, and a figure comes out of the bushes about 200 yards away and comes walking down. John Weed.
John Weed, he's everywhere.
He was everywhere.
Awesome.
We should add to
I'll go
the
ahead
trip.
and plan a salmon trip then.
Huh?
Yeah, salmon trip would be fantastic.
Probably the second weekend of November. I think that's kind of the peak of the run.
That's exciting. We should add to the trip planner, the put-ins and takeouts where we need to bring a cake to keep our car safe. It's an option we don't have in the trip planner right now. We should add this.
Right?
Details.
There could be a note saying prefers chocolate cake or strawberry cake.
I don't think this guy was being fussy. He was a pretty cool dude,
Good.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
planning meeting Tuesday, I believe, next Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. I hope we will see you, a lot of you.
Bye-bye, thanks.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Xavier.
Bye.